I'm Jolene Wynn, and this is the Porn Addict's Wife podcast, episode number 112, Triggers. Your life does not have to revolve around your husband's pornography addiction. You are not defined by his choices or by what he sees on a screen. You are not just the porn addict's wife. You are so much more. In this podcast, I'm going to teach you how to go from handling it to healed. Because I've been where you are, and you don't have to stay there. My name is Jolene Wynn. I'm a member of the LDS Faith, a certified life coach, and a wife of a former porn addict. And this is a podcast for the porn addict's wife. Hello, my ladies. Happy Independence Day. I'm recording this on the 4th of July because I couldn't resist. I think I did this last year too. I love the 4th of July. It is my favorite holiday because I'm super patriotic. And I always say I'm the most patriotic person I know. And I love the 4th of July because it is the one time of year that everybody feels the same way that I do about America, the same way I feel about it all the time. So I love the 4th of July. It is my favorite. And today we are renting a water slide and having it out in front of our house so that us and all our little neighbors and friends can come enjoy the water slide because it's so hot where we live and the pools are all super crowded. And so my kids are all running around like crazy, trying to clean up so they can get all their chores done before we celebrate the 4th of July. I don't do parades. I grew up doing parades on the 4th of July, you guys, and all I remember was that it was so hot. If you guys don't know, heat is not my favorite thing. I would rather be cold than hot. And although I live in North Carolina, which seems silly, why would I live in North Carolina if I prefer? I should have moved to Vermont. But I love being in the water and at the beach and in the pool and all of that. But parades on the 4th of July were always so hot growing up. So I don't do parades on the 4th of July, but we do have a water slide coming, which makes it just as exciting. So that is what's happening today. Happy 4th of July to all of you guys. I was remembering last year, if you guys go back and listen to, I don't know what episode number it is, but last year on the 4th of July, I released an episode and I think I called it Freedom. And that's the one I did on the 4th of July last year. And I was just remembering it. And I remember that it was so good. So go back and listen to it. I did want to do some housekeeping announcements. You guys, I was remembering that a year ago on July 1st was my first group that I started. I had been doing one-on-one coaching up until that point. And on July 1st of last year, I launched my very first group of ladies. So all of you ladies who were in that group who are listening, it's been a year. Can you believe it? I'm so excited. And I was remembering that one of the coolest things, the reason that I wanted to start the group in July was because it was 6 months until Christmas. And that's what I wanted. It's halfway through the year. And I wanted you guys to think about that. Take a minute and pause. Ladies, it is already halfway through the year. And I don't want to think of that as like a glass half empty kind of deal. But when you think about where you want to be 6 months from now, think about how do I want to feel at Christmas time? The things that I'm struggling with now, do I still want to be struggling with them then? And if the answer is no, which most of us, the answer will be no, then what am I going to do to make it different? This is something that actually came up on a coaching call this week with my clients. My client brought up, she said, I was just thinking about where I was a year ago before I started coaching. And she's been coaching for about 6 months now. And she said, even just a year ago and 6 months ago, how lost I was. She's like, my self-confidence has grown so much. I think she found my podcast about a year ago, and then she joined coaching in January. And she has just made so much progress. She feels so much more self-confident. And that was what she was trying to just relay to me. She was just talking about how amazed she was at her own ability to communicate with her husband and to navigate his emotional her emotions when he relapses, because he's still struggling with that, and how much more confidence she has in her ability to handle it and to move forward and to work through it and not have it shut her down like it used to. And she also has so much more confidence in how she feels physically because she's been working through her own insecurities. And so ladies, if that's something that appeals to you, I want to encourage y'all to come join me in coaching. This is something that we deal with, that we work through every single day. And it's my job to help you uncover the things that are keeping you stuck. The things that are preventing you from moving forward. The things where you say, I'm trying really hard, but I'm not really getting farther and I don't know why. This is actually, you guys, pardon the ramble of this morning, okay? But I just have so many thoughts. I feel like I haven't talked to you guys forever. But this is partly why I just hired a nutrition coach. I just hired an online fitness coach to help me with my nutrition and my exercise. And the reason that I did that was because I almost hired her last year. A year ago, I got on a consultation call with her, just like you guys get on with me. And I hesitated and I said, you know what? It's a lot of money. I don't know that I want to do this right now. You know what? Let me take the knowledge that I already have and see if I can just really dedicate myself and I can do it on my own. And here I am a year later, and I hired her because I'm exactly where I was a year ago. So it was fascinating because I realized that I had a great amount of knowledge that's enabled me to get to where I am, but there must be something preventing me from getting further because this is where I am. And this is where I've been for the last 2 years, right? Physically, my weight, my physical health has been the same. I'm stuck. I've gotten myself to a certain point, and that's amazing. And I'm proud of myself for doing that. But I need someone else to help me get further, to help me get where I want to go. And if that's what you feel like, then I want to encourage you to come sign up, and I will help you figure out what it is that's blocking you, that's preventing you from moving forward, and help you work through that so you can get where you want to go. So that goal that feels impossible to you, whether that's not having a trigger, which we'll talk about today, not feeling triggered when he looks at his phone, or feeling confident when you are physically intimate, or not worrying about vacations, right? All of those things, whatever it is for you that you're like, oh my gosh, in my dream world, I wouldn't worry about him relapsing. I wouldn't constantly second guess his motives. I wouldn't doubt him. I wouldn't think he's lying, right? All of those things, if those are the things that if that goal is out there, then I want to help you reach it because it's totally possible. And the reason that I know it's possible is because I've done it and I've helped so many women do it, okay? And that's what I want to offer for y'all. My coach is helping me do that. I have a physical goal that I feel like is impossible, but to her, she's like, yeah, we've got this. I can totally get you there. I don't know how she's going to do it. And it's a lot of work on my part, but I'm willing to do it and I'm all in. So if you guys are all in, come join me. Just head to my website, jolenewind.com. You can sign up today, okay? And we are going to get there. Just imagine where you could be 6 months from now. I'm so excited for you. Okay, today, ladies, let's keep going, okay? Let's talk about triggers. This came up on Coach Week. If you guys joined me for Coach Week last week, it was amazing, and I loved it so much. But we talked about triggers several times, okay? Now, Rob and I have talked about triggers in the past before. There's a bonus episode somewhere floating around in the podcast abyss. That is Rob and I doing a bonus podcast episode together, and it's called Triggers and Temptations. You guys can go listen to it. But we're mostly talking about his triggers on that podcast episode, and today I want to talk about yours, okay? What is a trigger? Do you guys think about it? If you guys hear the word trigger, what do you think it is? Okay, I want you guys to really you can pause the podcast right now and actually think about it. What is a trigger? Okay? Most of us think of a trigger, and I even looked up all the definitions that exist on Google. Most of us think of a trigger as something that happens to us, right? I get triggered. I was triggered. That is a trigger for me, right? It's something that happens that almost creates an involuntary response, okay? Now, what's interesting about triggers and the way most of us think about triggers is that we think that a trigger is powerful enough to create our feelings, okay? We talked about this a lot last week on Coach Week. If you guys can go back and you guys can go watch that. But on Coach Week, one of these women that was on the call, she said, you know, I am really triggered by women in swimsuits. And it was fascinating to dive into that a little bit because it's not all women in swimsuits. I was like, well, let's narrow this down. Who's specifically in swimsuits? It's not her mom. Like, her mom in a swimsuit doesn't trigger her, or anyone over the age of 60. It's like women that she thinks look better than her in a swimsuit, right? That is what is a trigger for her. And so many women that I know can relate to this, okay? There are certain things that our brain thinks that thing creates feelings in us. Now, what's actually happening is that a trigger is a circumstance. A trigger is something that's outside of us. It exists and it is neutral. And then we have a thought about it that is creating a feeling. But this is all happening so quickly that it feels involuntary. It feels like that thing, that trigger, is creating our emotions. The problem with this, the problem of thinking of this way, is that we end up trying to avoid all of those triggers so that we don't have to feel the feelings we feel when we are around them. Does this make sense? Let me give you another example. On Coach Week the next day, another girl came on and she was talking about how she feels triggered when they're just walking down the street and there's a pretty girl. And I, again, asked her to get super specific, and she was talking about makeup. She said women that are really done up, that have their makeup done, that look really put together, whatever that means in her mind. And what's fascinating is that then she thought, her brain went on this long tangent about how it's all society's fault, and if we could just unwrap the pressure that society puts on women to have makeup on all the time, then this wouldn't be a problem, right? Do you see how her brain was trying to avoid, her brain wants to avoid women that put on makeup in order to not feel however she feels because of the thoughts that she's thinking when she passes women who have on makeup. Okay. Now, she can't control other people that have on makeup. And so she's decided that it's society's fault and that we need to change society in order to change how women show up so that she doesn't have to feel this way. Ladies, this is never, ever, ever, ever going to work. Okay. Because we can't control other people. We can't control whether or not someone else wears a swimsuit to the beach, or whether they wear makeup, or whether they pass us on the sidewalk, or whether there's an attractive waitress serving our table. Okay, so today I want to talk about what's going on in our brains when these triggers happen, and then how we work through it. Okay, a trigger, ladies, is just a circumstance. That's it. And I don't mean to trivialize it, but again, I want you guys to notice how much heaviness, how much weight you're putting on those circumstances. How do you think about your triggers? Okay, are they heavy? Are they something that you're trying to avoid? Ladies, I was there once upon a time. I was so anxious anytime we went on a trip that required us to go to a beach and there were going to be other women in swimsuits. That just was a huge thing for me. And I'm going to talk to you guys about why. But I thought of it in a very heavy way. Okay. And that wasn't helpful for me, because all it did was create more anxiety. So again, I want to offer that you can think of those triggers, not even as triggers. You can just drop the word. I don't even like using the word. I'm just using it because I know you guys use it. Okay. A trigger is just a circumstance, and that's it. It's something outside of us that we have thoughts about, period. Okay. Those thoughts are what create our feelings. Okay. So let's look at what's going on in our brains when this happens. One of the reasons why triggers are so difficult is often because of comparison. Okay, so there's a trigger, whether that is someone wearing makeup or a woman in a swimsuit or your husband looking at his phone or whatever it is that creates a lot of emotion. It brings up a lot of emotion inside of you. A lot of times that's because our brain is comparing. Okay, when our brain is in comparison mode, then your brain will pretty much always find you lacking. Okay, so take, for example, the woman on the call last week when she was saying that a trigger for her is women in swimsuits, and it's actually women that she thinks are more attractive than her. Okay, this is comparison. This is when your brain is looking around you and sees something and then uses that person to compare against yourself in order to showcase you all of your shortcomings. Okay. Now, we've talked a lot about this before on the podcast, but the things that come up for us are the things that we agree with. It's our own insecurities, right? This is why it's not every woman in a swimsuit that's a problem. It's women we think are more attractive, we think are more ideal, right? Their stomach is better than our stomach. Their legs are sexier than our legs, right? Her arms look more amazing than my arms. Her skin is better, whatever we think it is. And usually it's because we agree, right? Our insecurities are the things that we agree with. right? And I've talked a lot about this. If someone came up to me and said, you have the ugliest smile, it doesn't bother me because I know that that's not true. However, if someone comes up to me and says, did you know that you carry all of your extra weight in your stomach and you have super broad shoulders? Okay, well, yeah, I'm a little insecure about that because I agree. I carry my weight. When I carry extra weight, it's in my stomach. And I have super broad shoulders that sometimes I'm a little insecure about. And it's agreeing with that insecurity that makes it an insecurity. Do you guys see what I'm saying? And when we compare, when our brain is stuck in comparison, it's like our brain is always looking for ways that we are not enough. If you believe that you are not enough, your brain is always going to be on the lookout for proof that that's true. And this is one of the ways that it does this, is it compares ourselves to other people. So when you walk down the street and there's a beautiful girl who happens to have on a lot of makeup, your brain is going to compare yourself to that girl who's wearing makeup. And if you're not wearing makeup or not enough makeup, or you don't think you're good at makeup, then your brain is going to be insecure about that. If that's your insecurity, if you think, I wish I had more makeup on, or I wish, or I don't feel as pretty if I don't, right? Or whatever the thought is, that comparison is what's going to bring up all the insecurity. You're going to feel insecure, or however it is that you feel. Those emotions that get brought up are from the comparison going on in your brain. So first of all, I want you guys to notice this. Notice that your brain is doing this, and be in charge of your brain, and notice that it's not required. Now, ladies, this is not easy to do. This is not simple. This is simple, but it's not easy to do. So again, I want to encourage you to come coach with me. I will help you learn how to practice doing this. But notice the thoughts that come up. Pay attention to the thoughts. One of the best ways that you guys can always pay attention to your thoughts is to be really curious. I wonder why I feel so insecure around this girl. Why is it? What are my thoughts? What am I thinking? Why am I thinking that? Okay, try to be super curious and let go of the judgment. Okay. Number 2, one of the things that's so difficult with triggers is that we are wondering what he's thinking. Okay, this is when we get out of our brain and we start to try to get into his. Okay, we're in his thoughts, not ours. Now, the problem with this is that we don't actually know his thoughts. Ladies, this is such a mess, right? When we're walking down the street and there's a beautiful girl that walks by and we're like, oh my gosh, what is he thinking? He probably thinks that she's so attractive. He probably thinks like, oh my gosh, I wish I was with her. He probably thinks she's super sexy, blah, 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 blah. Our brain goes a million miles an hour thinking about what he's thinking about. Okay, this is why we have so much anxiety in these moments. It often brings up a lot of anxiety because we don't actually know what he's thinking. And when our brain doesn't actually know something, it gets worried because it thinks that that is a problem. So if you guys notice this, if you notice that your brain wants to go and jump into his thoughts and what he might be thinking, I want you to bring your brain back to yourself. Let him have his thoughts. You don't even know what they are. They're probably not even looking at her at all, and probably looking at like, I don't know, the sports car that drove by instead. And yet our brain wants to worry because it thinks it's important to worry. Okay, that's a whole nother podcast. Okay. But our brain likes to worry and it wants to predict things, and it wants to predict what he's thinking so that we can feel better. Our brain thinks if I just knew what he was thinking, then I'd feel better. None of that is true, because his thoughts are not creating our feelings. Our thoughts are creating our feelings. So notice when your brain wants to jump into his thoughts and bring them back to your own. Okay. The third thing that happens with triggers, and this kind of goes along with thinking his, like wondering what he's thinking about, is that we kind of assume agreement. Okay. Here's what I mean by this. If I think she's attractive, then he must as well. Right? It's like our brain is unquestioned. Now, this comes from our brain's desire to be right. Okay? Our brain always thinks we're correct. That's its job, partly. And so if I think that said human being on the beach is very attractive and sexier than I am, then my brain thinks my husband must also think that as well. This is a problem in our brain because our brain thinks, well, if he thinks she's more attractive than I am, then he will want her, not me. Right? Again, it's that idea in our brains where I'm not enough. Here's proof he's going to agree with this. And if he agrees with that, then X, Y, and Z. Then he'll probably relapse, or he'll go have an affair, or he'll leave me, or whatever our worst fear is, right? That's what our brain then makes it mean. But it's all coming from our brain's assumption that he agrees with us, that that woman is sexier, that she is more attractive, that he would rather be with her than be with us. Our brain assumes this, and it's very subtle. And a lot of times we don't even notice that our brain thinks this, but we don't even question it, right? Like, for example, with this woman I was talking to on Coach Week last week, she was like, yeah, there's, this, for example, there's this woman at the beach who was at our last trip, and she was just like so gorgeous. And so like, of course, my husband would think she's gorgeous too. But this is just an assumption that you have about what he's thinking. And it could totally be false. So notice that you are assuming that he would agree with you, and this is simply because your brain thinks that you're right. So I want you to question that. What if I'm not correct? What if he doesn't agree with me? What if, even if she is really attractive, it doesn't mean anything? Okay? And this is something I really want you guys to pay attention to, is that, and this is the next thing, is when our triggers come up, the hardest thing is what our brain makes it mean. Right? If this woman is more attractive, let's say it's totally true. Let's say my husband thinks she's super attractive. Let's say he notices her and he thinks she's attractive. Then what? Then our brain goes into a worst case scenario. Then our brain doesn't know how to handle it. Then our brain, again, like I was saying, goes into all of our worst fears. If he thinks she's attractive, then maybe he'll feel triggered and maybe he'll go watch porn, and then he will relapse, and then X, Y, and Z. Right? Do you guys see what I'm saying? Maybe then the next time we're together, he won't be thinking about me and he'll be thinking about somebody else. Maybe this will make him want to go watch porn. Maybe then he will want to go have an affair with this chick. All the things. Our brain then makes it mean something, or about him or about us. Our brain will also make it mean something about ourselves. It will make it mean that we're not enough. It will make it mean that we can't ever be enough for him, that we are never going to be as attractive as somebody else. Our brain takes our worst fears, our worst insecurities, and if we believe them, it finds evidence to see that they're true, which then reaffirms that belief to our brain. Okay? I'm going to teach you in just a moment how we actually reverse this, but just notice that this is what's happening. And then the last thing about triggers is that this is the hardest thing about this. About triggers, the hardest thing is because of what we feel when this happens. Okay, the trigger itself is fine. The problem with triggers is how we feel about the triggers. Okay, this is why we try so hard to control our surroundings. We try to control whether we go on trips, or whether he goes on trips, or where he goes on trips, or who they're with. We try to control makeup. Just like that example, we try to control the women around us and who's wearing what swimsuit. And vacations, ladies, this is huge. Whether or not we go on a vacation, we try to control his work trips. We try to control who he hangs out with, how much time he spends on his phone. All of those things. We're trying to control everything around us so that we feel better. Ladies, this is never, ever going to work, because your feelings are not created by what's outside of you. And even if you manage to control everything that you possibly think could trigger you, what's going to happen is your brain will just find another trigger. Something else to reaffirm what you already think and believe about yourself. That's its job. Okay? So it's the work. You have to go in and work on your own beliefs first, and then the triggers dissolve, ladies. Okay? So here's how we overcome them. You guys ready? This is exactly the 5-step process that I teach in my coaching program. I have 6 modules, 6 core modules that teach this 5-step process. I know it should be 5 and 5, but one of these steps requires 2 modules because we go really deep into it. It is a 5-step process. This is how you overcome any trigger, change any thought, change your belief, process your emotions. This is how you change your life. Are you ready? I've talked about it so many times on the podcast, but here we are breaking it down again. Are you ready? Number 1, awareness. First of all, you have to become aware that this is even happening. Like I was saying before, the best thing that you can do when you have a trigger is start to be super curious. What am I thinking? Why am I thinking it? What thoughts am I having? And be super curious about it. Step number 2, acceptance. Ladies, this is super difficult. It's very tempting to judge ourselves for our thoughts and our feelings. I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't think this. That's a terrible thought. Why I shouldn't think that about this other person? She's probably super nice. She's probably wonderful. Why am I such a terrible human being? Why am I doubting my husband? That's not very wifey of me, right? All of those thoughts are irrelevant. We have to get rid of all the self-judgment and learn how to accept without making it mean anything. So step number 1, we have to become aware of our thoughts. Step number 2, we have to accept them. Step number 3, we have to process the emotion. Okay? Processing emotion is simple and not easy. You guys, this is something that I do one-on-one with my clients. When a new client signs up, I give them a couple weeks and then we get on a call one-on-one so that I can make sure that they're actually processing an emotion, because 99% of us don't know how to do this. Actually correct. Okay. Most of us think we're processing an emotion if we cry, but typically that's not correct. Processing an emotion is so much deeper. And I know that it's a super life coachy term. It's very difficult for me to describe to people in not life coachy words. And so all I can say is, if you want to learn how to process an emotion, come coach with me and I can show you how to do it. Okay. That's how you're going to learn. Okay, I can talk about it all day long, but if you don't actually experience it, you're not really going to understand what this means. Okay, but you have to process the emotion in order to let it go. Okay, step number 4 is we can then work on changing the belief, changing the thought. This is where the fun work happens. This is when we get to do intentional thought creation. This is when we get to decide what it is we want to believe about ourselves and about our world and about our husbands and all of the things. And we get to practice thinking those thoughts on purpose. That's super fun. So we get to change the thought. We have the thought because we became aware of it, we accepted it, we processed the emotion behind it. Now we get to change it. We get to choose a new thought. Often this takes incremental steps. I've talked about this a lot, but I call them ladder thoughts, like you're going up a ladder. You can't go from I hate myself to I love myself in a day. It's not going to work. But we can incrementally work on new thoughts that will get us there. Okay? So I've shared this before, but I started with I hate my body, and I had to just move to acceptance, which was I have a body. That was my second ladder thought. That was the thought that I could get to, that I could believe. So I worked on that thought. And that leads to step number 5, which is when you practice your new thought on purpose. So we changed it. We chose a new one. And now we have to practice it. This is when you have to be the boss of your brain, because this is trickier than it sounds. Because when your brain has been operating a certain way for, I don't know, a few decades or so, it's pretty tricky to try and overhaul your brain's thought pattern overnight. And it's not going to happen overnight. I wish it would. That would be amazing. But it's not going to happen overnight. What's going to happen is you have to be the boss of your brain. This is why it's, again, so helpful to have a coach, because sometimes it's so easy to slip back into our old patterns. So easy, especially because our brain has a 4-lane highway dedicated to get straight to that thought. Okay? The neural pathways in our brain have created are really well worn to get from point A to point B. It's like, oh, okay, I know what happens here. I see an attractive woman on the beach. I think horrible thoughts about myself and assume that my husband is lusting after this woman. Okay. Now, when your brain has been operating under that certain pattern for so long, the neural pathways between those thoughts, the connections between those are super strong, super fast, which is why it feels instantaneous. It's why it feels involuntary. This is why we have to be in charge of our brain and be the boss of our brain and practice stopping those thoughts in the middle of them. Okay. This takes practice, intentional practice, okay? And then you get to practice thinking new thoughts. You have to remind your brain to think new thoughts. But again, this is just a continual process, because what happens is you can't just lie to yourself and say, oh, I'm no longer going to be triggered by this, because what happens is you can think that, but it's not going to change how you feel. You can't convince yourself out of your feelings. Okay, I tell my clients this all the time. You can't logic your way out of your emotion. This is why it's so often that we quote unquote know that our husband's pornography addiction has nothing to do with us, but it doesn't feel that way, right? It's because you can't think your way out of your feelings. You have to feel them out. That's the processing emotion part. So every time you think that thought, that old thought, it's going to create emotion. And you have to process that emotion before you can practice the new thought. Otherwise, that old emotion is still going to be there and you're just going to be trying to think your way out of your feelings and it's not going to work. Okay? This is the steps. That was it. Those are 5 steps. Do you guys want me to say them again? I'll say them again. 1, awareness. 2, acceptance. 3, processing emotion. 4, change your thought. This is when we intentionally create a new thought. And then 5, you get to practice your new belief and be the boss of your brain. That's it. Those are the whole steps. You want to change your life? There they are. Okay? It's a very simple process. Is it easy? No. Do most people do it? No. You guys listening to this podcast, you guys are light years ahead of most people, most human beings, not just women, most human beings. Most people are not aware of their brain and they're not doing anything about it. Okay? But I really want you guys to ask yourselves, okay, where am I? Where was I a year ago, 6 months ago? Where do I want to be 6 months from now? And how am I going to get there? And I want to offer to help you do that because I know you can do it on your own. I did it on my own and it was totally possible, totally doable. Do you want to know what I wish I had done? Hired a coach a long time ago because I could have gotten here in half the time or even faster. Ladies, you don't have to do this by yourself. There is a community of amazing clients that I have created who are all here to support you, who are all working on this too. It's amazing to log on to these calls and just to see all these beautiful faces and understand that you're not alone. And not only are you not alone in your husband's pornography addiction, you're also not alone in trying to work through it this way. Because sometimes that can feel like it too. You're like, man, I really wish maybe I was just, am I the only one that's doing this? Am I the only one that's working on my marriage? Am I the only one? Like sometimes you get a little fatigued, right? And that's okay. Then you can log onto the call and say, you know what? It's not just me. And how amazing is it that it's not just me? There's all of these amazing, beautiful, strong women who are all working through this. And I'm there to help all of you every single step of the way, to teach you, to help you get there faster so that you don't have to spend the next 6 months trying to control all of your triggers so that you feel better. Trying to manage your husband and control his phone and how often he goes out and the shows that you watch and the waitress that gets assigned to your table and the vacations that you go on and the work trips that he has, trying to control all of that in order to try to control how you feel. That's backwards, ladies. Let's do it the other way. That's actually what's going to work. Come join me today, JoleneWynn.com. Go sign up today. You get lifetime access. We're just going to start. And we're going to leapfrog ahead. You guys, I love you so much. I want you to come with me. I want you to go forward and I want you to stop feeling like you're feeling. So come join me. I love you so much. I'll see you guys next week in a brand new episode. So take care. All right, my ladies, if you enjoyed that podcast episode, you have to come join my coaching program. It is $2,500 for lifetime access to all of my online content and all of my coaching calls. Not only will you get one-on-one attention from me through coaching calls, you will also get to join this amazing community of women who are all working through this the exact same as you are. You'll also get 24/7 access to me through Slack, our private group messaging channel, and you will get access to all of the new material and content that I create. If you are ready to start applying everything that you've learned on the podcast and really take everything to the next level and start creating who you are as more than the porn addict's wife, I want to encourage you to come join my program today. Head to JoleneWynn.com, click on join, and you can join anytime. I can't wait to see you there.